and thank you for tuning in. Our special guest today is Jessica Brody. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you doing, Adam?
Great, and everybody tuning in. I'm really excited about having you on today, Jessica, because I read Save the Cat writes the screenplay book by Blake Snyder. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago,
Hmm.
and then I saw that you wrote the Save the Cat writes a novel, and
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome because as a writer, I think you have done a great job breaking it down for everybody. So
Thank you.
yeah, so everybody tuning in today, Jessica and I are going to talk about her new book, The Sky Without Stars, and Save the Cat writes a novel, and we're just going to talk about some writing stuff in general. Sebastian, do you mind playing a little bit for us? All right, so everybody, this is Sebastian Messer playing some live music for us here in the studio. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Jessica, that's my son, Sebastian, and he has been playing guitar for a couple years now. So he opens the show with some live music for me like every week. So
That's great. That was awesome.
yeah. Um, okay, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in your writing career?
Yeah, sure. I actually, way back when, I used to be a financial analyst. I majored in economics, so writing was not really my career path. But I always loved to write ever since I was a kid. And then back in 2005, I got laid off from my job as a financial analyst, and I decided instead of getting another job that I would try to write a novel. And I failed miserably for a long while in that endeavor until I was introduced to this. I basically couldn't figure out how to tell a good story. I had the right voice, I had a writing style, but my stories were just kind of blah. And then I was introduced to this book called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is a screenwriting guide. It's all about how to plot and structure screenplays.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up using it, the same kind of structure guide, to plot my novel. And since then, so I once I did that and I rewrote the current novel I was working on that had been rejected about 70 times
Oh
around the
wow.
publishing industry. I rewrote that novel and I sold it pretty soon after that. And then since then, I've sold about 17 or 18 novels to major publishers. And I kind of say I owe it all to this Save the Cat because it taught me how to write a story and it taught me what structure is supposed to look like. And I've been using it ever since. And as you said, I have now written Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is basically a book on how to adapt this screenwriting method to novels.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Blake Snyder has passed away, and
Yeah.
but I think it's awesome that you picked up that legacy. And
Well, thanks. There's a team of people that have been continuing his legacy, which is just so great. He passed away in 2009, and at the time that he passed away, he was already doing workshops, and he had a team of people around him that were helping him with the Save the Cat,
mm-hmm.
brand. And since then, they've continued doing workshops. They've hired more screenwriters and me as a novelist to teach other writers, and they maintain the website. They keep
Yeah.
blog posts. They post blog posts, so they do a really good job with it. And they actually hired me. The way the Save the Cat book came about is once they found out that I was using it to write novels, they asked me to guest blog on their blog, which I did.
Yeah.
From there, they asked me to teach, which I did, and then from there, that evolved to us collaborating on this book together.
I think it's really cool because I came across the book. A little bit about my background. I freelance for the Savannah Morning News. It's our local newspaper here, and so I was doing just event articles and like charity of articles and stuff like that, and just interviewing people or whatever. And I would come across, like, I would cover different events and things like that, and I met different indie authors. And I always liked writing, but my background is in business and leadership as well. And I worked at a university for like 10 years. So, funny enough, you did finance. I did financial aid for students. So it sounds similar, everybody, but it's totally different worlds.
Yeah.
But I would help students, with their processing their financial aid and that kind of thing. And so I totally get you breaking down the Save the Cat into like a format for yourself to use, because that's how my brain works too. Like, I actually took your Save the Cat Writes a Novel and I adapted it to a Scrivener template that I've been using.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, this is so cool. But I came across this book and I read it, and it helped me because I started getting into writing fiction. I don't know, just as a fun thing to do. And I've always liked to write too as a kid, but I never really wrote fiction. It was always like business stuff, and and then the journalism stuff. And fiction is a whole another level. It's a whole different world to me, but I love it.
Yeah, it is. It is quite different. I mean, I'm just setting out to write Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is my first nonfiction book.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a whole other set of challenges. Like, I felt like, I know how to write a novel. Like, I sort of figured that out by now. 18 books later, I finally figured it out. But the Save the Cat, writing the nonfiction, I was like, this is so different. Like, I was trying to keep my voice alive and keep like the writing interesting, but it's like so different when you're talking about real things. And then also on top of that, it was really hard for me to not make stuff up.
Yeah.
Like, everything has to be actually true and has to be backed, and you have to know it. In fiction, you're kind of like, well, that could happen potentially, and that's why it's fiction. So
well, I love the structure of the book. I believe it or not, this might sound kind of strange, but something I've been doing lately, actually I started doing it this year, was when I find a book that I really want to devour, I'll pick up a paperback or a hardback copy of it. I'll pick up the ebook on Kindle, and I'll pick up the audiobook. And I did the same thing with yours. And
great.
yeah, so
well, thank you.
but I haven't, it's kind of strange. I have not wanted to rush through it because I've just been absorbing the knowledge and the skill sets out of here. And I'm quite, but be honest with you, I'm actually on page 267 on the log line. That's where I'm at with the book.
Oh, you're pretty far.
Yeah. So, but I love how you break down the structure of it. I love the fact that you, it's very much like the Save the Cat. I mean, it's almost like the same kind of flow through, where you're just a continuation, and then you're breaking it down, saying, hey, okay, this is where you should be. It doesn't say this is what you should write, but this says like the hero's journey or whatever. This is like, okay, this is where you should be at with your progress for your novel. And for me, that was great because I started last year. The reason why I was like wanting to get into fiction was as an outlet, but I wrote this novella, and I put it out last year. It was a little vampire book. And I started writing the second one, and then life happened. And I was like, haven't been writing. And when I came across your Save the Cat Writes a Novel, I actually had like 13,000 words, and I decided to shelf that and then start over, because I was like, you know what, this formula, it seems like it's going to be a lot better for me as a writer, and it just it helped me so much. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and that's actually the reason why I messaged you on the website, because I was like, what, this is pretty awesome, and I want to help share it with other people, because that's what this show's about. It's like interviewing indie authors and entertainers and artists, and we just kind of talk about their process and things like that. So I appreciate it.
Well, that's great, and I'm so glad that it helped you.
Oh yeah, it's definitely helping me. I'm in a group of some local authors, and we right now we've got like a little 90-day challenge. And I was like, you know what, y'all need to pick up this book because it is it's just fantastic. So everybody, you're listening to us on WRUU Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and I'm your host today, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is Jessica Brody. Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show today. This first part we've been talking a little bit about Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Do you mind if I ask you about your latest book?
Oh yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah, Sky Without Stars, and you co-wrote this with, I'm not sure how to say her last name, but is it Joanne Rendell?
It's Rendell.
Rendell, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's...
she's been a longtime friend of mine. We've been friends forever, and we decided that we wanted to take on the daunting challenge of reimagining Les Misérables by Victor Hugo set on a distant planet.
Yeah.
As you do, like that's just things like that pop into your head. So we wrote this book called Sky Without Stars, which is a sci-fi reimagining of Les Mis. And it's the first in a trilogy, and it just came out in March, so we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I have not actually started reading it yet, but it looks very interesting. It looks like you both spent a lot of time. I started doing your Udemy classes, and I saw that I saw that you two were partnered up for the writing one, and I picked that up, and I was like, you know what, this is pretty neat.
Yeah, we've been working together on different projects for a while. This is our first book together,
Mm-hmm.
and co-writing was a whole other experience. So this book was a lot of firsts for me. After however many novels I've written, this was my first time ever doing a retelling.
Yeah.
It was my first time ever doing an off-world sci-fi. So I've done sci-fis before, but they've all been, set in our world, and this is a distant solar system, a distant planet, not our world at all. And then it was my first time co-writing, so there was a lot of firsts and a lot of new challenges. But my philosophy as a writer is every book you tackle has to have new challenges. Otherwise, you'll just the books will start to feel the same, and you will get bored writing them, and people will get bored reading them. So I'm always looking for the next challenge with each book.
What was it like? Because in the videos, you both seem like you gel really well. What was it like doing that as a first time co-authoring it?
We had a blast. We obviously are good friends, and as you noted in the workshops online we teach together, we get along really well. But I always say if you're going to pick a co-author, you really need to pick someone that you not only get along with, but that you complement each other's strengths. So basically we have totally different strengths as writers, which makes it really work. So she's just amazing at sort of poetic language and descriptions and sort of building out the world and the scenes. And then, my strength is definitely plot, and obviously I wrote a plot book, plot and dialogue. So, we would brainstorm everything together, and then we would sort of divide up the scenes or divide up parts of the scene based on who we thought was going to be the best person for the job. So the scenes would go back and forth between us many times, and I would sometimes structure a scene and get the dialogue and the structure of the scene in place, but I would leave giant gaps for her to fill in with some really great descriptions or some really great poetic language and things like that. And then she would do the opposite when she would draft scenes, and she would leave the dialogue for me. So it was really, really fun, and we quickly found a process that worked for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key, with co-writing, which is really hard for writers, is you really have to learn how to let go of control. After so many books, I'm really used to being in total control of the book, of the plot, of the narrative, of the characters, and you can't sort of look at it the way you look at your solo books. You have to look at it as this joint thing, and one of the rules we set up really early on was that if one person in the duo doesn't agree with something, like doesn't like the word choice or doesn't like the plot turn or doesn't like the sentence or whatever, it has to change. You can't argue for what you wrote, because there's sort of no point. If one person doesn't like it, then it's not working for the team. So you always have to kind of look at the project as the group's, the duo's project, not as your project. So it's sort of like, if she doesn't like something I wrote, then the book isn't ours anymore if I fight for it, So that was something we adopted really early on and have stuck to it ever since. So we'll read each other's chapters and we'll leave comments, and with stuff we're like, oh, I don't know about this sentence, or I don't know if this is necessary, and then we'll go through those comments together on Skype and we'll discuss each one. And if there is like a word that I wrote that she doesn't like, we will basically brainstorm until we find a word that we both like.
That sounds like an interesting process, because it's hard enough sometimes just to get someone to agree on where to go to eat.
I know, and exactly. That's why you kind of really have to like pick the right writing partner. I'm not sure. I mean, I never say never, but like she's one of the only people I know in my life that I would write a book with, and that's just because we are so great together. And there's that relationship probably wouldn't exist with other people.
How did you two become friends? How did you meet?
We actually met because we both started out writing in the women's fiction world. So we met way back when at I was hosting a podcast actually before we were calling them podcasts. I think we called them something else. But I was basically hosting like a podcast, and I was interviewing authors, and she emailed me and said, can I be on your show? And I said, great. I looked up her books and they looked great. And so I interviewed her, and we did like this 30-minute interview, and then we pushed stop on the recording, and then we talked for 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
On the phone. So we were just like, we clicked right away. And she lived in New York. I lived in LA at the time. And then the first time I came to New York after that, we hung out, and then we've just sort of been friends ever since.
That is cool. I have met a lot of really neat people in the creative world too, and I've met some really good friends. My friend Josh and I, we actually were talking about a collaboration, because he writes a zombie series, and then I've been working on a vampire series, and we were like, what if there was a crossover there? So yeah, and we gel really well.
It's great. I always say, like, some of my closest friends are writers. I think it's just because there's no one who understands a writer better than another writer. And like, it is a very specific career path, and it is a very specific struggle that you deal with as a writer. And I think, like, you can try to explain it to someone who's not a writer, and I think they might understand that you're upset, but I don't think they really understand why.
Right.
And so I just have bonded so much with other writers.
That's actually a good point that you bring up. Talking about some of the weird things that writers think with your characters. Do sometimes they take, I know that you're really good about plotting. Do your characters sometimes try to take a wrong turn type thing, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Oh yeah, all the time. That's what characters do.
I've asked that question, different ways, like, to other people, because sometimes my character's like, this is what I want to do, man, and I'm like, no, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Oh yeah, it's a common problem, and I always say, like, I'm a plotter. I plot in advance. I'm not a pantser. The people who write by the seat of their pants, but I think whatever process works for you, you should do. And I wrote Save the Cat to enhance both processes, like both whatever. If you just write and then figure out the plot later, then you'll use Save the Cat in the revision process. But if you're a plotter, you'll probably use it in the planning process. But I always say to people, like, do not get married to your beat sheet. Like, if you plot it in advance and you start writing, like, you need to let go of those beats, because you don't know the characters yet. And you can try to plan all you want, but those characters are going to come to life in your head, and they're going to start making decisions that feel more natural to them than you thought they were at the beginning. And so you have to learn how to sort of go with the flow and re-beat or re-outline as you discover more about the people you're writing about.
That's a good point. I One of the things that I've been doing is obviously reading other books about writing and trying to learn more about the craft. I just finished before I started reading Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I finished Stephen King's On Writing, and I listened to that on audio. And one of the things that he was talking about was that he likes to start off with like a what if scenario, and then the story evolves into about a relationship with people. And I have to say I've tried outlining, and I've tried doing the just write whenever I felt inspired. That doesn't work either. But when I switched over, when I adapted this little 15 beats thing of yours with the Save the Cat Writes a Novel, I was able to write a 10,000 word novella in 2 weeks, and I submitted it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was invited to do this. It's an indie publisher. I was invited to do this horror anthology for her. She's got this thing coming out this fall, and she invited me to do it. And that was the first time I actually used the beat sheet. So I had this idea, right, of like what I thought would be a good, like a good what if scenario, and then I used the beat sheets to flesh it out. So I used that kind of like as my outline, you know, and then I guess it's like a crossover between plotting and pantsing, because I knew where I wanted the character to kind of progress, but the beat sheet kind of helped me figure out, okay, well, how do I get from this step to this step? What happens? What goes on between the characters? How do they progress to that step? And it helped me finish that in like 2 weeks. And I
That's
sent
great.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's meant to be like a blueprint. I think that the plot is sort of the bones of the story, and it's what everything else sits on. And so if you don't have a strong foundation or strong structure, then the story is going to kind of feel crooked.
Yeah,
Like I often use the analogy of or the metaphor of building a house, and the plot is the framework, and you have to build the framework before you can start really deciding where the furniture goes. So you have to write the book before you can really revise and make it good. And I think that's what really the Save the Cat method helps you do, is helps you figure out what that framework looks like.
well, listening to the audiobook, and then reading along with it, one of the things that I liked was your emphasis on the midpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't want to misquote you here, but I think in the audiobook you were saying that you can really tell by someone's midpoint if they figured out, where they're going with the story.
Yeah, the midpoint is such an important beat, and it's basically the beat where a lot of things happen. There's a crossroads of a lot of different motivations, and it's where the hero usually either gets something that they want or loses something that they want. And it's also a point where major turning points happen that will send the character in a new direction. So if you look at some of your favorite stories, it's always the midpoint where those shocking twists come, or those big reveals that you're like, oh my god, I didn't see that
Yeah.
coming, and it's now a whole different story. Regardless of what genre it is, it's those beats usually happen in the midpoint. And I think that when you fail to really understand the power of the midpoint and what it can do, it becomes obvious on the page, because the middle will feel like what we call the muddle. It will just
Yeah,
end up feeling
I
like a
like how
little
you said
mushy and not
that.
really defined.
Yeah.
But when you figure out exactly the kind of story you're trying to tell and exactly where your character is going, like the midpoint ends up being that really great like cement block that holds the whole thing together.
I think that's a really good point, because to me that's also the point where it's like, am I going to commit to finishing this book, or am I going to put it down?
It's true, yeah. I mean, I think when I'm reading, there's a couple different points where I give up on books. The first is at this beat that we call in Save the Cat world, we call it the break into two, which is the break into Act Two. It's when the hero leaves their status quo world and enters a new world, or tries a new way of doing things, and everything kind of changes,
Mm-hmm.
and they make a proactive decision to do something. And usually I can tell if I'm going to like the book or not at that point, either because the new world that's been introduced is something that I'm really interested in, and that's usually when I will keep reading. But if the author has sort of failed to make that break really distinct and make that new world really interesting, then I think that's where I first lose interest. And then the second point where I will usually put a book down is at the midpoint, if I'm feeling like the momentum is lost.
Yeah.
At this beat, which is the beat where the momentum's supposed to be renewed again.
Right. It's almost like, they've been beaten up a little bit, and then we're trying to figure out how they're going to get out of it, right?
Right.
Let's see. We're going to, Jessica, we're going to take a break, a little station break, and then afterwards, I'd like to talk to you more about your, what it was like writing, especially using your Save the Cat, what it was like writing with your co-author. And then I'd like to talk to you about some of your Udemy courses, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. Everybody, you're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and our special guest today is Jessica Brody, and she's written quite a few novels, and then we've been talking today about her new one, The Sky Without Stars, and Save the Cat writes a novel. Excuse me. And so Sebastian is going to play a little bit of music, and then we're going to have the station ID. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Thanks.
LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
Thank you to our listeners and the readers of Connect Savannah for participating in the 2019 Best of Savannah poll. With your help, WRUU has been selected as the best local radio station and the best local talk radio station in Savannah. Thank you, Savannah, for listening and voting, and supporting community radio.
Tonight on WRUU, tune in at 6:30 for Random Note, a themed magical musical journey. At 8, In the Pocket presents jazz, funk, soul, gospel, and more. At 9, Evening Eclectic is a show with no musical boundaries. And at 11, we bring you an hour of locally produced music. Our latest schedule is always at wruu.org. Thanks for listening.
All right. Let's see here. And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and you're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my special guest today has been Jessica Brody. Jessica is an author, and she's written quite a few books. We've been talking today about her latest book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and her other with The Sky Without Stars. So, Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. So the first half, y'all, we've been talking about writing and the beats on the 15 beats for the Save the Cat, and then her new book, Sky Without Stars. And it's been really interesting. I appreciate it, Jessica. And like what we were talking during the break, that's so cool that you did the same kind of thing where you interviewed authors and stuff. And I really appreciate you coming back on with me, to doing the same kind of thing where back in the day you were doing your podcast and stuff. And so I really do appreciate you coming on with me. So
I love talking to other writers.
that's awesome. Speaking of writing, we were talking earlier a little bit about your Udemy courses. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. Let me pull up the webpage here. Because I'm not trying to plug or anything like that. I am plugging a little bit here, Jessica, but the Udemy courses are on sale this weekend for like $9.99, and usually they're like over $100. I know, and this is for the folks that do the if you go through Jessica's book. I can't remember exactly where it was, Jessica, but I know that you offer, through one of your things, you offer a discount for people that actually go through the program. So thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, if you go on my website, jessicabrody.com, there's a tab on the menu that says for writers. And if you click on that, you'll go to my Writing Mastery portal. And in the Writing Mastery portal, you'll find links to all my blog posts about writing, links to my catalog of online courses with coupons, also links to tools and resources that I offer to writers, and some FAQs.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool because I was looking at your actually I was looking at your website trying to get ready for the interview or whatever, and I saw that the Udemy courses were on sale this weekend, because I think they're like, just looking at these, some of these are like over $100, some are like $79, but they're on sale this weekend for like $9.99. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I picked up the one that's I picked up 3 of them actually. I picked up the one that's Write a Best-Selling Novel in 15 Steps. That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, that's my Save the Cat companion course.
I was gonna say it sounds just like the Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I picked up the Foundations of Fiction Writing, which is you and Joanne, and then I picked up the Sell Your Novel to a Major Publisher, because I was like, I've been indie publishing, but I think what I want to try to do is take my manuscript, the next novel that I have an idea for, and put it out there into the world and say, hey, and you said, I think you originally, your first one, you were rejected like what, 60 or 70 times?
Yeah, I have all the rejection letters in the file.
Yeah.
I was rejected. So when you traditionally publish, and indie publishing is also a great route. It wasn't really around when I started.
Right.
So I went the traditional route, and I sold my books to a major publisher, and to do that, you have to have an agent. So you can't just send your book to Simon & Schuster or Random House. You actually have to have an agent who represents the book. So the first sort of line of defense in traditional publishing is to get an agent. So that, I basically built a course that follows all of the steps on how to get an agent, get a book deal, etc. And that's because that's the route that I took. So that's the route that I know. So back when I was first trying to get published in 2000, I think I first started in like 2005, 6. It was, I was getting rejected from every agent in town, and I have a lot of rejection letters from those agents.
I think going back to the Save the Cat, one of the things I liked was, talking about selling it to people, or like the chapter 14, it's pitch it to me, how to write killer log lines and dazzling synopsises, or and I think the formula says, like, on the verge of stasis equals death moment, a flawed hero breaks into two, but when the midpoint happens, they must learn the theme stated before the all is lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that from what I've been following, one of the cool things I liked, because I started doing the Foundations of Fiction Writing course, and I like how the videos are very short and they're pertinent, and then you have writing prompts with them, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What was that like developing? Because you've been through you've been doing this for a while, and you've been through the ups and downs with the publishing world, because when indie publishing came out, well, I mean, it's been out for a while, but when Amazon, let's just put it that way, like when Amazon and Barnes and Noble were like, okay, everybody can publish a book, the traditional publishing world took a big hit, but I think at the same time, it's also encouraged people to read more.
I agree. Yeah.
So
there's just a lot more. There's just a lot more content out there to be consumed as well.
Yeah. So what was it like? I mean, it seems like you've put all your best practices together for these classes. What was it like? Did you, as you were going through this, did you ever think like, hey, I'm gonna, one day I'm gonna help teach other people how to, to be a writer, or what the actual behind the scenes steps are to be able to get into publishing?
Yeah. It's funny. I never really thought about doing any online courses until recently. I've been hired a lot to speak at, to writing groups, writing conferences, libraries, things like that. So I had like a couple of different sort of workshops that I had put together for those types of events. And so Udemy, for those who aren't familiar, is an online teaching platform. So basically anyone can launch a course on Udemy. It's a video. They're video courses, and they're pre-recorded, and then the students can take them at any time they want. And when you enroll in a Udemy course, you have lifetime access. So as soon as you enroll, you have that course for life. And so you can take it as many times as you want, and you can take it at any pace you want. And it's just this really great model that I discovered a few years back. And when I first discovered the Udemy model, I wasn't really wary about the model itself, but I was wary that anything that I knew, any of my expertise, could translate. And so I decided I was going to do like a test course. Okay. And I put together a course, like the shortest course I had, the shortest workshop I had, and sort of the most punchiest. And it was a course that's called, it originally was called How to Brainstorm High Concept Ideas. I think it was all about how to come up with high concept ideas. And then we sort of quickly learned that the word high concept wasn't as prevalent as we thought. And
yeah.
We being me and my husband. So we changed it to develop blockbuster ideas that sell.
And that's actually the one that says your highest rated one on here too.
It was the first course we launched, and it did really well, and extremely quickly too. And my husband and I, he helps me produce it, we were like, well, okay. So apparently there is people who want to learn about writing on Udemy. Udemy has over, I think now they're like at 15 million students. They have a lot of students. So we quickly got to work on the next course, which is Productivity Hacks for Writers. And basically the way I decide what to teach is based on what I get asked. Yeah. So I get a lot of emails from writers. I do interviews like this, and I get a lot of questions, and I just keep mental notes about those overlapping questions. And I'm like, okay, if a lot of people are asking the same question and I have an answer, then I feel like it's sort of my duty to share that answer with other writers. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you write so much? So I do write a lot. I write 3 to 4 books a year. Yeah. And people are always curious about how I manage my time and how I do that. So I sat down to kind of figure that out and turn it into a course a lesson plan that I could teach. So I created a course called Productivity Hacks for Writers, and it's all about how to get the most out of the writing time that you have. And that one did also very well. And then from there, I did a course, this Sell Your Novel to a Major Publisher, which is also an area I had expertise. I partnered up with Joanne Rendell, and we did Foundations of Fiction, and that came about because she was teaching a sort of Foundations of Fiction class in person in New York City, and so we decided to take that course and develop it for online. And then since then, I've also developed a course called Write a Best-Selling Novel in 15 Steps, which is a companion course to Save the Cat. And right now, I'm actually finishing up a course that will launch this week, all about how to conquer writer's block.
That's
So
awesome.
It's another question I get asked a lot.
That's
and
awesome.
I have many answers for. So
that is so cool, because with this show, that's one of the things that I try to focus on is the process and then overcoming obstacles. Because with writing, I think any kind of entertainment, I talk to authors, I talk to artists, entertainers, actors, and like songwriting, writing, different types of writing. Writer's block is a big one for people, and I think to me it seems like it boils down to procrastination, but it also boils down to life happens. Like for me, I had writer's block because I had a lot of personal things going on in my personal life, and I was not motivated to write. Even though I had a story idea in my head, it was just like, I don't really want to write right now. I don't have the energy to write. So I think that's really cool that you're coming out with a new Udemy course. One of the things I like too is we're in a consumer based economy, right? And so people are always being advertised to and things like that. I paying attention to like your talks, like I was on your little Instagram live a couple weeks ago, and one of the things I like about what you do is you're not salesy. You're very just like, hey, you're down to earth. Like we're talking right now, same thing. Everything I've seen so far of you is you're pretty much a very down to earth person, and you're like, hey, this is what I did. These are the tools that helped me. This is how I think that you can do it. And then you put it out there and you say, hey, this is available. So I really appreciate it. I think it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that too. I do like sharing wisdom and knowledge, and whatever I think I know, I like telling people about it.
Well, it's cool too, because you also have not only are you saying, hey, this is what I have, but you also have real life examples of, okay, well, I had the 60 or 70 rejection letters at first, so it's not like it's easy street, and I've been doing this for a while, and these are the tools that work for me. I think it's really cool. Believe it or not, it's changed the way I thought about writing, especially with the Save the Cat. And when I saw the Udemy on sale, I was like, you know what? I've got to snap those right on up. So
yeah, no, that's great to hear.
That's pretty cool. Everybody, you're tuning in today live. We're on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is Jessica Brody. She is an author, and she's pretty cool. So, Jessica, we've got about 10 minutes left on the show. Do you mind if I pick your brain about the writing and editing process?
Sure, I'd love it.
Okay, so these might be questions that you've heard before, but I just want to ask you and then share with our listeners some of the things, because there are a lot of common things. One of the common things that people ask me is, when can I call myself an author or a writer? What do you think?
I love this question, actually, and I wrote a blog post about it a little while back, but I personally don't think there is such a thing as an aspiring writer. I think that you are a writer the same way you are a human. Yeah. It's like, we don't say I'm an aspiring human.
That's a good way to put it.
When you're a writer, it's just sort of something that's in you and and I think that you should always consider yourself a writer, and I think you should be what you want to be, and regardless of the results. And I think too many people are sort of dependent on, I will be a writer when I sell a book, or I'll be a writer when I hit the New York Times list, or I'll be a writer when this happens. And I think that, that's just detrimental to the person that you're trying to be. I think that you should own who you are as a writer. I think that when people are are artists, or painters.
Mm-hmm.
Even I don't think that many artists say, "Oh, well, I'm not really an artist. I just paint for fun." I think people who are artists are like, they like to own it. So I think writers should do the same thing. I think you should own that you're a writer and be a writer right now and be a writer every day.
I love that. I love that viewpoint. Tony Robbins is one of the guys I like to listen to, and he talks
I love
about,
him too.
yeah, he talks about, we are the stories we tell ourselves,
Yes,
and
exactly.
I feel like what you just said, that makes so much sense because, you have to own it. You have to say, yeah, I'm an author. You don't say, well, I'm an aspiring writer, or I love the way you put that because it's part of who we are. Storytelling is just an innate part of us being human beings.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Tony too, and I think the philosophy that I like to live by is, be it and then you'll have it. And a lot of people do it the other way around. They say, as soon as I have it, that's when I will be it.
Yeah.
But I think you need to be it first, and I think you need to basically show the universe that you're serious about it.
Yeah.
And by declaring yourself as such, the universe will respond.
That what you just said. Have you read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist?
I have, yes.
Okay, so the universe. I love that part too. That's like one of my favorite books of all time. So that the universe conspires for you to help you with what you want. Okay, so next question. We know you're a plotter. Were you ever a pantser?
I was a pantser very, very early on. The first novel I ever wrote, that is the one that garnered all the rejections that never sold. I did sort of just kind of pants my way through that one, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being a pantser. It's not the way my brain works. I quickly discovered as soon as I learned about plotting and outlining, it just sort of spoke to me in a more profound way. That's not to say I wouldn't pants a novel at some point. But I think that my brain is now so trained to be a plotter that I would probably start pantsing, and I would plot in my brain even if I
it would automatically
write it down.
take over, right?
The outline would form anyway somehow.
Yeah. I think that's pretty cool too, because I'm slowly converting over to being a plotter. I'll be honest with you, the 15 beats has got me hooked, so I see. Well, the thing is too, is like my brain, I don't know how to say it, but it's very analytical, and so for me, I like structure too, and I love the 15 beats. It's like, okay, this is where you should be going. It doesn't say exactly what you should write. It doesn't tell you that, but a lot of times in my head, I'll just have like an idea of where I want them to start, and then I'll have an idea of what where I want it to finish.
Yeah.
I don't really have the in and outs of it, but I'm starting to incorporate that into my writing, and I've noticed it helps me a lot. Where I say, okay, this is what I would like to see happen, and then in between, it's like, okay, well, this is what's going to go on. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm not trying to rapid fire questions here at you, but I had a professor one time say that writing is only rewriting. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure I agree necessarily with writing is only rewriting, but I am in the camp that there are two jobs of a writer, and that's the drafter and the reviser.
Okay.
And I think that too many of us try to do both jobs at once, and it ends up being just disastrous. So it's sort of like an author friend of mine, Emmy Laybourne, says it's like when you try to write and revise at the same time, it's like trying to drive with your foot on the brake and your foot on the gas at the same time. And you'll just sort of keep stalling. You won't actually move forward.
Okay.
And so I think that you really have to, my philosophy and behind, a lot of what I do, and this is the philosophy behind the writer's block course too, is, you have to play both sides, and you have to wear both hats, but you have to do it very separately. And so when you sit down to draft, it may not even feel like writing, because a lot of it is just sort of a vomiting process of like vomiting ideas out and not really caring if they're working or if they are making sense or if they're any good or if they're written well. And then you come in with the reviser hat, and you see this mound of stuff that you have to work with, and then you shape it and you mold it, because it's, I really think that when you write a novel, you don't know what that novel is until you're done.
Yeah.
And so if you can just get to the done part as quickly and messily as possible, you're gonna have a lot easier time revising it once you sort of have the bigger picture. But if we get too bogged down with the nitty-gritty details of every sentence as we're drafting it, it's going to be very hard to move forward every day.
I agree with you. I think it also is kind of like in sports, you have practice and then you have the game time.
Right. Yeah.
You have to practice, you have to go through the motions, and then game time is like, okay, well, your autopilot kind of takes over, and, you know, muscle memory and all that. To me, I'm not a huge fan of editing, but I like writing. But I'm starting to, the last year or so, I've started to kind of get into the process of, you know, I'm not going to say that I love editing, but going back and not inline editing, and going back and actually reading it, trying to be partial and say, okay, well, what would this sound like to someone else? You know, so yeah, it's kind of cool. You obviously spend, you know, a lot of time writing and doing your seminars and things like that. What's something that you enjoy doing, you know, as an author out there in the world that people might not think about?
You mean outside of my writing?
Yeah.
Well, I like to travel. I like to read a lot, obviously. My favorite thing to do is sit on the porch and read. I have 3 dogs, so they keep me kind of busy. And I can hear them upstairs barking right now. I locked them. I locked them into one side of the house so they wouldn't disrupt the interview. I mean, I'm pretty busy with the writing, but when I do have time to get away, I like to go places and I like to read a lot.
That's cool. You said your husband did the videography for you?
Yeah,
he did a great job.
He's my co-producer on the courses, and he loves photography. He has all the gear.
He did a great job. I didn't realize that. He did a really good job. So kudos to him. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on with me today, Jessica. People can find your stuff on jessicabrody.com, right?
Yep, that's it.
And it's pretty straightforward on your social media. It's just Jessica Brody, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on today. I thank you so much for sharing with us. And then I'm gonna put the podcast up later on so people can listen to the interview. But I'm looking forward to actually reading the Sky Without Stars and finishing up the Save the Cat Writes a Novel and doing my Udemy classes. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I wish you the best of luck with your writing.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. You're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my guest today has been Jessica Brody. And I'm your host, Adam Messer. And up next, we have Savannah at Night. All right. Thanks a lot.
This is WRUU LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. This is Kinski from the album Live at WFMU, April 22nd, 2003.